Hi, and welcome to week 4. We just started week 4, so we do have, we finished up week 3, so I really appreciate the work that you've been doing. Just to let you know, what we're going to be doing this week is we're going to be exploring modernism. We're going to be starting the kind of move into what we might consider more relevant work. Although I do believe what you're going to find in the poetry this week, it's going to take you a bit of time to digest, but I hope that you are going to have fun with it. Remember, we're going to be looking at some poetry. There is a small podcast on plot to kind of help you to start to think about how to look for plot, and not just in stories, but also in poetry. Also, just a heads up, for those of you who have never used ProctorU before, the final exam is not proctored. The midterm is proctored, and the midterm will be opening up on February 8th at 4 a.m. Now, the reason that I'm opening it up so early is because I'm going to try to let you guys have a good bit of time. Normally, this is open during week 5. However, I'm going to kind of give a little bit of time beforehand and a little bit of time afterwards. So it'll be opening up on the 8th of February, which is a bit of time away, but just keep it in your head as far as planning your ProctorU, and it will be closing on the 16th of February at midnight. And you do need to contact a proctor, as it is a proctored exam. If you have any questions, I know that I've emailed with a couple of you about it, and I've also answered some questions on the Ask Your Instructor link. So please feel free to take a look at that and check it out. So, to this week 3, we talked about naturalism, and naturalism where Romanticism was a bit more, I guess you'd say, hopeful. Naturalism is often very much focused on raw or unpleasant experiences. It is commonplace, it's unheroic, it has a sense of hubris, or even a kind of sense of the downtrodden, the fact that people are characterized or controlled by their environment, that there isn't any way to escape this. And of course, because at this time slavery was ending, the American Civil War was becoming kind of a punctuating mark to that, and we had African American writers kind of exposing some of these inequities and being very much concerned with these controlling forces and individual worth. And we did the reading of W.E.B. Du Bois from The Souls of Black Folk, and then we also looked at Booker T. Washington and his exploration. I mentioned here about Garvey and also Dunbar because those are other voices that I think are important for you to know or be aware of. In light of the discussion postings this week, I really think that you guys have done an amazing job of considering what it means to engage in this type of exploration and conversation. And I see a great amount of promise in your work. To start, I saw, Jennifer pointed out that naturalism is this kind of controlling impulse of the environment, and really pulling in her reading of the Yellow Wallpaper with excellent evidence, I think is a fantastic way to frame it, and I so appreciate your use of MLA. This is a fantastic post, and I urge you all to take a look at that. Now, I think that Emmanuel has some great points too, and I really appreciate Emmanuel's reading of The Open Boat and this idea of being trapped in a situation. And many people have read this work in a sense of not just being of a experience of that time of being in an open boat, but also kind of it being kind of a symbol or an anagram for what's happening in people's lives at this time. Travis had some great observations in kind of really looking at how naturalism and realism differ, and the pulling in of kind of the despair from The Open Boat, the raw and unpleasantness of the Yellow Wallpaper, and of course the bifurcation between Washington and Du Bois. Brittany pulled in some really good ideas about naturalism being more philosophical, because it isn't so much about the actual factual events that have happened, but instead it really is about kind of the underpinnings that guide or the cultural understandings that focus this. Megan's posting, I think you need a bit more development. It looks like a little bit, like it needs to have a little bit more exploration and paragraph modeling. Megan, I would recommend you taking a look at, Brittany's or Emmanuel's or Jennifer's or Travis's, as it's really, they've got some great postings. Really good explorations between Jennifer and Travis and Emmanuel and Hadia. Really, I appreciate the way that you're thinking about how these readings are exemplifying the various modes and models of thought in the actual categories or genres that they're in. I also appreciate Hadia's point about fate and thinking about these controlling forces in society. Michael mentioned in his posting the sense of kind of the essence of a person's experience and kind of this relation to commonality. And I think that that's a good observation. I do think that your post needs a bit more development in the use of evidence to really be fully focused and kind of clear. Richard Mason, I appreciate your observations about Up From Slavery. I think that you really do a good job of exploring what actually is happening. And as you mentioned, the notion that you've never really been exposed to this is something that is consistent with kind of reading literature, is that you're kind of inhabiting the narrative imagination of someone else, and it allows you to see something. Doesn't mean you have to agree with what they're saying, but you're in that space, you're in that place. Caitlin, I really appreciate your exploration of Charlotte Perkin Gilman's The Wallpaper, and kind of thinking about this notion of the naturalistic characters who are conditioned and controlled by the environment, and gender and other elements that I think that you pointed out well. Jeremy, thank you for your explorations of the reading. I like that you point out the nonfiction aspects of Booker T and W.E.B. Du Bois, because they're not stories. They actually are essays or interpretations of an experience, and very relevant for this day and age. I saw in Chris's reading some good overviews, but it was a little too surface. So Chris Turner, I would recommend that you get a bit more engaged with the readings and the literatures. I think there's a lot of rich evidence to support your observations. Vonetta, I think you did a great job of exploring the kind of the connections between not just the fiction, but the nonfiction. I love that you speak of the possibilities for progress in the future from Du Bois, and that he does seem to be elevating beyond this kind of very naturalistic experience. Rico, thank you very much for your exploration. I like that you point out the notion that naturalism seeks to give the reader a first-hand account. So in that sense, it's kind of like realism, however, that it is also about determinism and this kind of philosophical lack of idealism, which is a good point. Joe, your position on Stephen Crane's exploration is good. This idea of the oiler surviving and dying near the shoreline, it's so deterministic and so absolutely just, I guess you'd say, pessimistic, that it does capture a lot of what naturalism is about. Russell, thank you so much for your reading of The Souls of Black Folk. You really do a good job of presenting the bind between Du Bois and Washington, because they were not in agreement and they were very much bifurcated. And even nowadays, you can still see the evidence of these two thoughts or these two thinkers in race relations. I appreciate Theron's observations about the reason for writing The Yellow Wallpaper. And even though it kind of didn't hold your interest, you pointed out that it reminds you kind of this kind of focus on lobotomies or sterilization and eugenics, thinking about the effects that are external being applied to a character. And that's a very naturalistic perspective. Brooklyn, I'm glad to hear that these readings were your favorite. They're a little pessimistic, but they really are rich. And I think that naturalism often is about overcoming obstacles and being faced with immense, immense situations you have to battle, which you mentioned well. I think that Breonna's, your observations about Up From Slavery and the Yellow Wallpaper are good, and I like your use of evidence. Remember to go ahead and cite using MLA, making sure that you have a works cited section. Randall, I really appreciate it, and like I was mentioning before, the use of works cited is really key, and I like to see that you're pulling that in, and that's perfect. Nathan, thank you so much for your notions and your understandings. I'm glad to see that you enjoyed the reading material, and I like that you present in your last paragraph, that naturalism is the writer's depiction of real-life struggles or adversities during the time period in which they are written. And I think that's a good way to kind of capture it, and I think you kind of taken in a good amount of information and distilled it well. I appreciate Kawanna's, your connection with survival being kind of the word of the week, which is a perfect one for naturalism. They absolutely would agree with you. Ahmed, I'm glad to see that these are right up your alley and that you are more focused on this kind of the underlying experiences that you can kind of pull out. I think that you mentioned the meaningfulness of it, and that's an important part of this, is seeing the meaning in these works. Kaylin, your connection to I guess you'd say all of the readings was very well done, and I appreciate that you mentioned the veil, because that is an important part of Du Bois' theories and ideas is of this veil. And I think that kind of focusing on that can also help to understand some of the situations that we're going to read about in future stories, but also in what's going on in contemporary times too. Overall, I think you guys have done a fantastic job of engaging this literature, and I look forward to seeing what you do with the poetry. If you do have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thanks, and have a great day.